Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The street was still lively despite nightfall. Car headlights intermittently illuminated the sidewalk where people were walking. Captain Diana Brooks, a senior officer in the American Army, in impeccable uniform. His bearing, his confident gait, and his aura of authority immediately inspired respect in those who crossed his path. But that night, respect was not what she was going to receive. A police officer on patrol, Officer Rick Johnson, known for his racial prejudices and impulsive temper, he noticed her from afar. In his biased mind, seeing a black woman in a military uniform aroused a mixture of contempt and anger. Without taking the time to assess the situation, he slammed on the brakes in his patrol car and jumped out, gun drawn. "You, put your hands up," he shouted, aiming at the captain at point-blank range, his eyes filled with arrogance and hatred. Around them, passers-by stopped, stunned. Some took out their phones to film the scene, sensing that something unjust was happening. Diana remained impassive. She didn't tremble, didn't scream, her cold, piercing gaze locked onto the policeman's. "Officer, you are making a grave mistake," she said in a firm but calm voice. Johnson sneered. To him, she was just a pretentious black woman he was going to put in her place. But what he didn't know was that Diana Brooks wasn't just a soldier, she was captain in the U.S. Army, decorated for her missions and respected throughout the country. And in a few seconds, he would discover that pointing his weapon at a superior officer in the Army, in front of witnesses, would mean the immediate end of his career. The city center of Dallas, Texas, the area was bathed in the usual evening bustle. Restaurant neon lights flickered, car horns blared, and hurried passers-by made their way through the crowd. In the midst of this tumult, Captain Diana Brooks, he advanced calmly. His upright posture, his perfectly pressed military uniform and his polished boots attracted attention. Some looked at her with admiration, others with curiosity. She had just come from a strategic meeting with local National Guard officials. At 40, Diana was known for her iron discipline and composure. She embodied military rigor, but also a profound dignity that naturally commanded respect. At the same time, Officer Rick Johnson, a municipal police officer, was patrolling the area. Tall, burly, with a stern face, he had a reputation for being brutal and unpredictable. Several complaints from citizens had already been filed against him, but he always managed to get away with it thanks to inside help. That evening, his mood was even darker than usual. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon Diana. A black woman, in military uniform, walking alone in the city. For him, it was a provocation. His biased mind immediately kicked into gear, searching for a pretext to stop her. He slammed on the brakes in his patrol car in the middle of traffic, setting off a cacophony of angry horns. In a flash, he jumped out of the car, hand on the butt of his gun. "Hey, I'm Ba." "Stop," he yelled in a harsh voice. The passers-by froze. Diana stopped, staring calmly at him. Her gaze remained neutral, but her body stiffened slightly, as if she was already anticipating what was going to happen. Rick Johnson drew his weapon and pointed it straight at her. A heavy silence fell over the street. People nearby took out their phones to film the scene, shocked to see a police officer aiming at a lone woman, in military uniform. "Hands up, now," Johnson ordered, his eyes shining with a mixture of hatred and arrogance. Diana didn't move. She held his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "Officer, put away your weapon immediately. You don't know who you're dealing with." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The spectators were beginning to realize that this was not a simple altercation. Johnson, for his part, sneered, convinced he was dealing with a hoax. But he didn't yet know that this senseless act would change his life, and mark the beginning of his downfall. The entire street seemed to be holding its breath. The gun barrel pointed at Captain Diana Brooks, it shone under the streetlights. Every second seemed endless. Around them, passers-by filmed the scene, some whispering, "She's a soldier. She looks like an officer. This cop is crazy, he's going to be in trouble." But Rick Johnson heard nothing. His ears were ringing with anger and pride. He only saw a black woman refusing to obey his orders. "I told you, hands up now," he shouted, his voice trembling with impatience. Diana remained perfectly still. Her gaze, icy and authoritative, pierced like a blade. She didn't need to shout to dominate the situation. Her voice dropped to a deep, firm tone. "Officer Johnson, you are committing a serious offense. You are threatening a senior officer in the United States Army. Lower your weapon immediately." The name rang out in the air, United States Army. The spectators exchanged incredulous glances. Some began filming more closely, murmuring that the video would go viral. Johnson recoiled briefly in surprise. But his pride caught up with him. He frowned, raised his voice. "You think your uniform excuses you? You don't impress me. Here, I'm the one in charge." He took a step forward, his weapon still extended. Without flinching, Diana slowly took a small card out of her pocket, her official military badge. She held it up clearly in view of a passerby's camera. "I am Captain Diana Brooks, U.S. Army. If you pull the trigger, you will not only destroy your career, but your entire life." A leaden silence fell. The crowd gasped. Johnson gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. His finger trembled slightly on the trigger. Part of him understood that he had just crossed an irreversible line, but his ego refused to back down. And already, in the distance, another police car was approaching, drawn by the commotion. The blue flashing lights illuminated the street as a second police car sped towards them. The sound of sirens momentarily drowned out the murmurs of passers-by. Two officers rushed out of their vehicle, Officer Maria Sanchez and Officer David Miller. They froze at the sight before them, their colleague Rick Johnson, gun pointed at a woman in military uniform. "Rick, what are you doing?" Sanchez exclaimed, stunned. Johnson did not turn around, his eyes still fixed on Diana. "I have the situation under control." "Back off," he shouted. But the situation was clearly out of his control. The crowd had grown denser. About 15 phones were filming, pointed at him. Voices rose. "She's an army officer, you idiot. Lower your weapon, she's of higher rank than you. We're recording everything, you're screwed." Diana, still impassive, raised her hand slightly toward Sanchez and Miller, signaling them not to approach abruptly. Her composure impressed everyone. "Officers, I ask you to observe what is happening," she declared in a firm voice. "Your colleague is threatening me with his weapon, without any valid reason. I am Captain Diana Brooks, U.S. Army." Sanchez and Miller exchanged a worried look. The gravity of the scene had just sunk in on them. Rick Johnson was not pointing his weapon at a simple civilian, but at a senior officer of the American Army, and in front of witnesses. The crowd roared, some chanting, "Shame on him! Justice for her!" Under the pressure, Johnson began to waver. His jaw tightened, his finger trembled even more on the trigger. But he refused to give in to Diana, refused to admit defeat before a black woman who looked down on him. At that moment, someone in the crowd called out in a loud voice, "I've already sent the video to the Facebook Live. The whole country is watching." That sentence rang out like a verdict. Johnson's fate had just changed. He was now a prisoner of his own actions, trapped by the truth unfolding live. The air was heavy, thick with tension. The gun barrel, still pointed at Captain Brooks, seemed to weigh a ton in Rick Johnson's hand. His face was dripping with sweat, his eyes flashed, but deep down, panic was beginning to eat away at him. The voices in the crowd were becoming more insistent. "Put away your weapon. She's the captain, you idiot. Everything is being filmed, you're going to pay for it." Officers Sanchez and Miller advanced cautiously, their hands raised in a gesture of appeasement. "Rick, put down your weapon." "Listen to me, this has gone too far," said Miller, in a tense voice. Johnson turned his head slightly, almost choking. "She's provoking me. She thinks she can order me around." Diana raised an eyebrow, unperturbed. Her dry, measured tone cut short her accusations. These are not orders. This is a statement of fact. You are in serious violation of the Police Code of Conduct and federal law. The crowd approved, applause erupted. Johnson paled. You're lying. You must be an imposter, he stammered, his voice breaking. He took a step back, his weapon trembling even more. But the military ID card that Diana still held prominently gleamed in the streetlights. Undeniable proof. Sanchez took a step forward, determined. Rick, look around you. Dozens of witnesses, cameras. You're finished if you continue. Johnson attempted one last desperate argument, raising his voice to be heard over the crowd. I'm just doing my job. I thought she was a threat. Laughter and boos erupted from the audience. A threat? She's a decorated officer. You're going to end up in prison, man. Diana took a step forward, closing the distance. Her gaze met Johnson's, icy. Officer Johnson, listen to me carefully. You are 2 seconds away from signing the final end of your career. Make the right choice. Now. A sudden silence fell. The weapon was still trembling, but Johnson's hand seemed to be losing its strength. His mask of authority was cracking, revealing his fear. The gun barrel wobbled dangerously. Rick Johnson, once so self-assured, was now nothing more than a trembling figure under the accusing stares. His shortness of breath betrayed his anguish. Around her, phones continued to film. Every second of her humiliation was already being recorded on the internet. Sanchez, more resolute than ever, approached with a calculated step. Give me your gun, Rick. It's no longer an option, she said sharply. Johnson stepped back, shook his head like a cornered animal. No. You don't understand. She challenged me. It's a matter of respect, he yelled, his voice cracking. A bitter laugh erupted from the crowd. Respect? You're pointing your gun at an army captain, raises a passerby. The spectators, now numbering around 30, formed an oppressive circle. Some chanted. Resign. Resign. Johnson's face turned red. Shame and rage battled within him. But the pressure was too great. Diana, still impassive, took another step forward. Her natural authority dominated the scene. Officer Johnson, she said calmly, hand over your weapon to your colleagues. You have just crossed all the red lines. His words fell like a guillotine. Johnson stared at Diana, his gaze filled with hatred and despair, then he looked at the crowd, his colleagues, the phones pointed at him. He understood. In a sudden movement, he finally lowered his weapon, but before he could say a word, Sanchez leaped forward and snatched it from his hands. Miller immediately placed a firm hand on his shoulder, preventing him from reacting. The crowd erupted in applause and cries of relief. Justice. That's it, it's over for you, Johnson. Johnson tried to struggle, but Miller tightened his grip. His gaze fell on Diana again. This time, it was no longer that of a confident man, but that of a man who knew that everything had just collapsed. Captain Brooks stared straight into his eyes. His tone remained cold and implacable. You have just lost much more than a uniform. And in the distance, we could already hear the sirens of another patrol called in as reinforcements. The sirens drew closer, their echoes reverberating between the buildings. The street was now saturated with flashing lights. Passers-by, electrified by the scene, chanted slogans, some live on social media. Sanchez held the confiscated weapon firmly in place of Johnson, while Miller held him down with an iron grip. Johnson, his face bright red, was still trying to justify himself. It was a misunderstanding. I thought she was a threat. I just wanted to do my duty. An uproar erupted in the crowd. Your homework? A woman screamed. Your racism, yes, replied another. Phone cameras captured every word, every gesture. Johnson saw his face displayed on screens, caught in a storm he could no longer stop. Diana, implacable, stepped towards him. Her voice resonated with an icy clarity. You pointed a weapon at a senior U.S. Army officer. You not only failed in your duty, you betrayed the uniform you wear. The crowd fell silent, hanging on his every word. Diana continued, more solemnly. And you did this in front of witnesses, in front of citizens, in front of your colleagues. History will remember your name, not for honor, but for shame. A leaden silence. Then, suddenly, applause erupted. Shouts rang out. Well done, Captain. Justice for Diana. Johnson lowered his head, overwhelmed. The pride that had kept him standing just minutes before had crumbled. His eyes filled with despair. He understood that he would never recover from this public scene. The additional police vehicles finally arrived. A patrol sergeant stepped forward, stunned by what he discovered. Johnson, unarmed, surrounded by the crowd and humiliated. Diana crossed her arms and calmly declared to the sergeant. I recommend that you immediately arrest this man for dangerous driving, making armed threats, and abuse of power. Johnson jerked his head up, shocked. Arrest me? You don't have the right. I'm a police officer, he yelled, but his voice broke in the tumult of protests. The sergeant cast a long look towards Diana, then towards the crowd that was filming, before nodding his head gravely. Officer Johnson, you are under arrest. The street erupted in cheers. The sergeant's decision hit him like a ton of bricks. Rick Johnson's eyes widened, unable to believe it. You're not going to stop me in front of them. In front of that woman, he stammered, his face crimson. But Miller tightened his grip on his arm. Sanchez, without a word, took the handcuffs out of their case. The crowd, now ecstatic, was chanting. Handcuff him. Handcuff him. Johnson struggled weakly. I'm a police officer. You don't have the right to. You are nothing anymore. Diana cut him off sharply. Her voice was icy, implacable, and her words struck like a sledgehammer blow. The sergeant nodded to Sanchez. She snapped the handcuffs onto Johnson's wrists to thunderous applause. The metallic clang echoed through the street like a verdict. Phone flashes popped, immortalizing every second of this public fall. The once feared police officer found himself exposed, humiliated, unable to hide his face. You can't do that. I have rights, he cried out in despair, his eyes rolling in all directions, searching for a way out. Diana approached, so close that he could almost feel her breath. She fixed her gaze on his. Yes, you have rights. And I have a duty to ensure that you are held accountable for your actions. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Many raised their phones as if to applaud the declaration. The sergeant ordered him to be taken immediately to the police car. Johnson was dragged away, handcuffed, to the jeers of the crowd. Each step resonated like a march towards the abyss. Diana, upright and dignified, observed the scene without flinching. She knew that this public humiliation was only the beginning. Soon would come the official reports, the army, and the justice system. And Johnson already understood that he had lost much more than a confrontation. He had just lost his uniform, his career, and his honor. The police car slowly started up, carrying away Rick Johnson, handcuffed and defeated, under the burning gaze of the crowd. Through the window, he could still see the phones held aloft, filming his shameful walk towards the annihilation of his career. In the street, some passers-by were already commenting aloud. This video is going to be everywhere, it's finished. Want to bet? It's on CNN in 2 hours. Meanwhile, Diana Brooks remained motionless for a few moments, watching the vehicle drive away. Her face remained impassive, but her mind knew that this affair would resonate far beyond this street. A few minutes later, as the police secured the area, Diana received a call on her military phone. She answered, her voice still calm. Captain Brooks. On the other side of the line, an army superior informed him in a grave voice. Captain, we've already seen the images. They're circulating rapidly on social media. the Pentagon is requesting an immediate report. Diana pursed her lips slightly. She had expected it. I will send my report within the hour. And I will officially testify against Officer Johnson, she replied confidently. Meanwhile, in a cell at the police station, Rick Johnson paced back and forth, his face drawn. He shouted to anyone who would listen. It's not fair. They've set me up. Everyone is against me. But his colleagues avoided him, some looking at him with contempt, others with indifference. His name was already circulating in press circles. His face appeared on social media accompanied by vicious captions. The police officer who pointed his gun at an army captain. Racism in uniform, the video that shocked America. Within a few hours, Rick Johnson was no longer a police officer, he had become the symbol of shame. And Diana understood that the case was going to become much more than a local incident. It was the beginning of a national storm. At dawn, the news was front-page news on every television channel. Local stations had broadcast the video, which was quickly picked up by major national media outlets. The face of Rick Johnson, gun in hand, facing Captain Diana Brooks, was shown repeatedly on screens. The debates became heated. On CNN, a presenter stated, "This is not just a police blunder, it is a public humiliation that raises the issue of systemic racism within law enforcement." On the radio, an analyst added, "The fact that he pointed a weapon at a decorated U.S. Army officer, and a black woman at that, is exceptionally serious." Meanwhile, Diana was preparing to enter a military conference room. Her superiors had decided she needed to make an official statement. She adjusted her impeccable uniform, aware that her words would be scrutinized by the entire country. The cameras were clicking as she took her place behind the lectern. Her direct gaze and firm tone commanded silence. "I was not victimized simply as a woman or as a black person. I was threatened while wearing the uniform of the American military. This act is an insult to the institution, to our values, and to our country." The journalists noted every word, the flashes intensified. She continued, relentless. "But I want to make this clear, I am not seeking revenge. I am simply asking for justice. And I will seek it to the very end." Applause erupted, unusual in this type of conference, but indicative of the emotion present in the room. Meanwhile, Rick Johnson, locked in his cell, watched the news on an old television mounted on the wall. Diana's face filled the screen, her words sounding like a death sentence. He clenched his fists, but a harsh truth hit him: he was no longer in control. His career, his future, his honor, everything had been taken from him in a single night. A few weeks after the incident, Rick Johnson appeared before an internal police tribunal and a military inquiry board. The courtroom was packed, the media were present, and the tension was palpable. Everyone there knew that this event would make history. Johnson entered, his shoulders hunched, aware that the public eye was on him. The images from the street, the video that went viral, had already ruined his reputation. His superiors made no secret of their disappointment, and his defense amounted to little more than a faint whisper. "I didn't want to. But then Captain Diana Brooks spoke. Her voice, firm and clear, resonated throughout the room. This was not a simple incident. It was a violation of all ethical and safety rules. A uniformed police officer must never, under any circumstances, point their weapon at a superior officer. Video evidence and testimonies from Sanchez, Miller, and bystanders corroborated his account. Johnson could only listen helplessly as the weight of his actions crashed down upon him. A few hours later, the verdict came down. Rick Johnson was dismissed from the police force for inappropriate behavior, abuse of authority and armed threat. Disciplinary action and legal proceedings were also launched against him. The room erupted in murmurs and applause. Justice had just struck, clear and unequivocal. Outside, Diana emerged under a barrage of camera flashes. Journalists were waiting for her, curious and admiring. She addressed the crowd and the media calmly. "This case is not just about Rick Johnson. It's about everyone who believes they can abuse their power with impunity. Today, we have shown that no one is above the law. The applause was deafening. Some passers-by raised their phones, but this time to film a symbol of courage and authority, not to denounce abuse. Diana Brooks became a national example, the woman who, with dignity and composure, had stood up to brutality and racism. And as the sun set over Dallas, she knew that this victory was not only personal, but a victory for justice and for all those who stand against injustice.